So, some basic information. We started a new book called Devarim, Deuteronomy, and the first chapter, the first parsha, the first section is called Devarim. And it's based on the first, what is it, the first word? It's the second word, Eila HaDevarim. These are the words, HaDevarim, Devarim. Now, the first 5 books, we know a little bit. Genesis, mainly stories of the forefathers and the development of the nation of Israel. We're starting at creation through Noah and onward till we get to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then what we call Bnei Israel, Yaakov's, Jacob's sons, and the descent to Egypt. Exodus deals mainly with, in the beginning, the preparations for the leaving of Egypt, and we get into even in the middle to the end of Exodus, many of the happenings that happened during the first year after leaving Egypt. And then Vayikra, most of it is dealing with the tabernacle and many of the rites, many of the rituals. Then we have Bamidbar, many of the travelings and the countings, the censuses before the golden calf, after the golden calf, the different censuses and the different uprisings, rebellions that took place. Deuteronomy is what we call in Hebrew in the Mishneh Torah. I know we have a book called the Rambam. He wrote a book called the Mishneh Torah. It's 14 major chapters, books. He took that name from what we call Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy means, or I should say Mishneh Torah means, a review of the Torah. So towards Moses' death, we're now in the 40th year, in the last months, month and a half of his life, and this is the time to review. Anybody that didn't fully understand something or has a question should come forward, basically, and we do a review. The review, Deuteronomy, is you may find some things that were not spoken about or written about, I should say, were not written about in the previous 4 books, but as we do know now that all the Torah was given at Mount Sinai, and the next 39 years were spent reviewing and going into details. But this is the end of his life, and a very important principle. Why is it important to rebuke at the end of your life? Rebuke meaning give charge, get people fired up, and hopefully to change and to repent if need be. And one of the reasons that Chazal talk about is the idea that it's human psychology. If someone says to you, oh, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, the normal reaction is to kick and rebel and say, who are you? Look at all the things you have wrong with your life. Who are you to speak? In fact, you tell me I have a little toothpick between my teeth. I got to, get rid of it. You got like a big log sticking out of your forehead. So who are you to tell me? This is like a normal human reaction. So the best time to give rebuke is before you die. Number one, the person realizes you ain't going to go on forever and just keep drilling him with all the wrong things he's done his whole life. You're going to eventually, pass on. And I think you have a lot of respect for someone who, at the end of his life, is going to tell you the way it is. You're not going to react the same way you would react to a much younger person who you know you're going to be with for the next 40 or 60 years, and they're just going to keep, hounding you, so you're just basically going to throw it back in their face. Here, at the end of someone's life, is the best time to give rebuke because number one, they're not going to be around. You better listen to their words like they're gold, and you have a lot more respect in that way. So Moses knew this, and at the end of his life, he's now going to give Israel the instructions or the rebuke that they so sorely needed. So that's a little bit of an introduction to what the Mishneh Torah, the chapter, the whole book of Deuteronomy is all about. Another idea, just you should know that at the end of every 7th year cycle, as soon as that Shemitah year is over, the holiday of Sukkot, Yom Kippur, there's a thing called Hakhel, where the king gathers all the people, the women, the children, all the people, and reads this book out loud from a Torah scroll. We don't have that today because we don't have a king. We don't have Beit Mikdash, but there are symbolic rituals that have happened. I've been in Israel 30 years, at least the end of the last 2 sabbatical Shemitah cycles, and that has been during Sukkot. The Prime Minister of Israel has read publicly certain things. There are at least 100,000 people present at the Kotel, and they blow these big trumpets. It's like a lot of fanfare. It's a little bit more of it's not commercialized, but it's like a hint to what was and what will be. Not that it's really the real thing, but it's called symbolic. And I thought it was really cute and neat to a certain extent, but I am looking forward to the real thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I underlined in orange, Elo Devarim. It's very vague. These are the things, right? It's not really spoken about. Which Moses said to whom? Now I have 2 boxes in purple. It says he spoke to Kol Yisrael. Kol Yisrael means all of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And then it describes where the place was. It's somewhere on the other side of the Jordan, in the desert. I'll just go to the English again. It says concerning the wilderness, but it's in the wilderness, concerning the Arava, opposite the Sea of Reeds. I mean, where is this place? It's somewhere between. And I put in green box, it says between, and it lists mainly 3 places. It's really 5. But Paran and Tophel and Lavan. But in the Hebrew, you have to understand, I'm going to do the Hebrew second, Beetov v'chatzerot, and then Lavan v'chatzerot v'dizahav. So there's like these 5 places, but interesting thing is that we're going to find out that the words Tophel v'Lavan, I didn't underline it, but it's right after the word Paran. It says Tophel and Lavan. These places don't exist, meaning you cannot find these names of places anywhere in Scripture. So everything else has a location, meaning we were there. Now, why am I telling you all this? Because we're going to find out that what Moses was doing was not saying outright all the sins that the Jewish people did, but mentioning places where sins took place. Now, if we say that he's mentioning sins, he's mentioning places where sins took place, then we should be able to match up the place with the sin. But that's a little bit of an exercise. If these 2 places don't exist, then what sin is it referring to? So we have various opinions, and we're going to discuss them a little bit. But the reason I boxed in green, it says between, because in the Hebrew, it says, you can see the green boxes, Bein Paran ubein Tophel. Between this place and between that place. In Hebrew, Bein ubein literally means in the meanwhile, or in between 2 places. If I said to you, Bein ubein, it's like, I'm just saying, like, between here and there. In other words, it's a phrase. So it's interesting because we're going to take and we're going to examine the word Paran and the words Tophel Lavan to find out a deeper meaning of what it means between here and there. And then, so that describes the place. Then the next verse, we'll call it verse 2, it now is giving us like some kind of a time frame, but not necessarily the date. It's a time frame because it's 11 days journey from the mountain. But really it's 39 and plus X amount of months later, right? So what do you mean it's 11 days journey? So it's probably helping us understand the location. Of course, it has a deeper meaning than that. And then it tells us this is in the 40th year, right? In the 11th month. Here it says it is the 40th year on the 11th month, on the first of the month. So we know we have 12 months. So, okay, so this is towards the end of Moses' death because he dies on the 7th of Adar of that last year. Okay. So this is, he's about to die. And then I put in that box again, there's a purple box. If you notice, the purple box up top in the first verse said, Moses spoke these things to whom? All of Israel. And this verse, we call it verse 3, it's still the same conversation and narrative, but it says that he spoke to whom? Moses spoke to Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. So what's going on? Earlier it said he spoke to Israel, and now it says he's speaking to the children of Israel. It's the same narrative, it's the same scenario, same backdrop, but he said something to all Israel, and now he's saying something completely different to the children of Israel. If he said something to the Israel, all Israel, what did he say to them? I'll tell you what, it's interesting. He's telling them the places they were at, which is going to remind them or rebuke them of the sins that happened. But wasn't it to all of Israel he spoke to? Why does it then say to the children of Israel? Or what's the difference between all of Israel and the children of Israel? Now, in previous classes, we did discuss this idea that Israel is called by different names for different reasons. We said the word Ha'am was referring to the Erev Rav, the mixed multitudes. We mentioned that the Hakahal, the congregation, was referring to the children of Joseph. We mentioned that when we saw Israel versus Bnei Israel, that Israel was really the leaders who were what? Like Jacob our father. That's why they have the nickname Yisrael, because they are righteous, pure, free from sin, leadership responsibilities. They have the standing or status of Jacob, Israel, whereas Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, are the masses, the Harmonam, the masses of people like you and me, you know. So we have to figure out what's going on and who talked to whom. Like, what did Moses say to them that was different than the rest? Why? So that's just the background. Let us begin. Okay? Okay. So the first thing that is brought down is that we don't find these words that Moses spoke to all of Israel except in one other place. So it's here and one other place. Now I'll tell you where it is. If it's in chapter 31 in Deuteronomy, chapter 31, verse 11. And this is the mitzvah of Hakel, when all the Jews are gathered. I said it's 31 verse 11. And the king reads part of Deuteronomy. Look at verse 16. Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of 7 years, at the time of the sabbatical years, during the Sukkot festival, when all Israel comes to appear before Hashem your God in the place he will choose, you shall read this Torah before all Israel in their ears. So the only other time we find all Israel, the words Kol Yisrael, is here. So what we automatically do is make a connection. There is some solid connection between the first verse in Deuteronomy and here. but it says he spoke to them in their ears. Why in their ears? What is the significance of in their ears? And we know, just to reiterate the question, that what's the difference really between Kol Yisrael and Bnei Yisrael? So I kind of alluded to that already. So the Kli Yakar, as I'm using him as a basis to explain what's going on, I'll just read what he says. It's very easy to understand that every place it ever mentions Bnei Yisrael, that's the children of Israel, for sure he's speaking about the masses, because they are the children of Israel. And anytime it's mentioned Yisrael alone, he's speaking with the leaders, Am Im Hagadolim, with the leaders, with the great people of Israel, because they have that nickname, or they're so similar to Israel that we give them that respect. So these are who we call the leaders of the Jewish people, who has been placed responsibility on them to rebuke the people. In other words, that's the job. We spoke so many times. What is the job? The leaders take the sin. They carry the responsibility of the sin on the people. Is that fair? No way. It's only fair when you understand that their job is to rebuke the people. As long as they rebuke them, they won't carry the sin. If they fail to rebuke them, then they will carry the sin. You follow the drift? Any questions at this point?
No.
If they fail to rebuke, then they actually are guilty. The guilt of the people will hang on them. It's going to be blamed on the leaders. The guilt of the people will be blamed on the leaders. They're going to carry that as a result of not doing their job of rebuke. Therefore, what did Moses want to do here? This first verse, and we're going to see the second verse, is going to deal with his way, Moses' way of rebuking the leaders for not rebuking the people, for the sins that we have, what these names of the places represent. And he's doing it in such a way, this is the most important lesson, in what we call a hinted fashion. He doesn't come right out and say, you serve the golden calf, you're responsible for the people serving the golden calf, or the sin of the spies, you're responsible for that. He says it by mentioning the name of the places where these things happened, out of respect for the leaders, and also to teach them how they should give rebuke. The way to give rebuke is to do it in a hinted fashion, in a way that only the person who's guilty understands you're talking about him. Have you ever been, I don't know, maybe in a church, a synagogue, hearing a preacher, hearing a class about, self-development, and you walk out and you say to your wife, or your wife says to you, man, I felt he was talking right at me, right through me. Like, that class was custom made for me. I mean, how did he know what's going through my mind? How did he know? I don't know if you ever experienced that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But he didn't point at you, and he didn't say you. He didn't mention your name. He was so kind about it. But you know you're guilty of the sins that he spoke about, because he did it in a way that only the person who's guilty of the sin would know. And that's the way to effectively give rebuke. Because if you get in someone's face and you tell them all the things they did wrong, well, they're either going to totally cut you off, or they're just going to, like I said, rebel and say, who are you? And, you got bigger problems than me. Who are you to tell me? You're not perfect yourself. Whatever. It's a normal human reaction. So the leader of the people, Moses, wanted to teach this idea over to the leaders, that this is how they should give rebuke, and he gave them rebuke for not giving rebuke properly in this fashion. So let me just get back into the text, where we said that if the leaders don't rebuke, then they carry the sin of the people. Therefore, Moses wanted to get them excited, get them more diligent regarding this, Because what's going to happen if what would the leader normally say? He might say, "They're not going to listen to me anyway. Why should I?" But what help is it? They're just going to make enemies, and they're not going to listen anyway. Guess what? You can't outsmart God. You're a leader. You have a responsibility. There's no excuses. There's a way to do it. I'm going to teach you how to do it. But don't think for a second that you're excused from the responsibility of giving rebuke by saying. In other words, this is a mistake that leaders would say. That God already knows, I already know, it's so obvious that this rebuke is not going to help a thing. These people are stiff-necked. they're very difficult people. What is my words going to help in this situation? I don't know if you ever met any leaders or anybody that ever said that to you when you said, hey, I see a problem in the community, could you please address it? And if he says to you, not going to help, you can tell him, you are the leader, you're responsible. If you don't do something, the sin is going to sit on your shoulders. I don't know if we have the guts to say that, but even the prophets, the prophet Jeremiah explained this. If you look in Jeremiah 2, verse 8. So this you have a leadership that failed, a failed leadership. It says the Kohanim didn't say, where is Hashem? Those charged with teaching the Torah did not know me. The shepherds, that's the leaders, rebelled against me. The prophets prophesied by the Baal. Baal is an idol. And they went after those that cannot avail. Meaning the people followed leaders who were not helpful. They didn't do what they're supposed to do. So there's guilt. You see it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Clear, huh? It's clear, huh?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay. So what happens? What basically happens is that we place the blame, we place the lack of, the absence of any tochacha by making this claim that, well, it's not going to help them, and they're not going to listen. But in truth, this doesn't fly. It doesn't work. It's forbidden to say such a thing. Because it's one of the 613 commandments. It says, you shall surely rebuke, and if you don't, the sin is on your shoulders. So what he's saying, like, hello, if it's your responsibility, just like I have to eat kosher food, just like I have to wake up in the morning and wash my hands, just like I have to put on tefillin, like I have all these obligations on me. My obligation is to give rebuke. Otherwise, I carry the sin of the people. But what was Moses teaching them? How. He was trying to teach them how to rebuke. Because what's the ultimate goal of the one who gives the rebuke? Not to have your name in, neon lights, you're the greatest. The ultimate goal is that the person should receive what you're saying, that they shouldn't come to rebel. So everybody who gives rebuke, he ultimately wants his words to be heard and not to be, and they shouldn't get worse, right? Sometimes you think, if I say something, it'll just make the situation worse, which may be true because it has to do with the method. You have to figure out a way to accomplish what you want. The goal is that they should hear what you have to say and not rebel. And how is this done? Yeah.
Does that principle of rebuke work for the rest of us children of Israel?
It's on everyone.
Okay.
It's 613 mitzvahs. It's clearly written in the Torah, right? I'll find it in a second. I'll show you exactly where it is.
Okay.
I think it's in Leviticus 19:17. You shall not. I'll wait till you turn it open.
Okay.
Leviticus 19:17. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall reprove your fellow, and do not bear a sin because of him. This is talking to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question is now method. How? As yochichem berem as below beferish, you tell him in a way that hints, that shall hint, and not explicitly. As long as it's a hint, how is he going to come and rebel? He's not, right? He's going to sit there and he can look at the other guy, you know. He doesn't, there's other people around. First of all, it's always better when you talk to someone out of love in private, but you never know the situation. So, but anyway, the idea is to say in a hinted way and not outright, in a way that no, I'm sorry. Ba'ofen shelo yavin devarav ki im zeh. The only one would really understand his word is the person who feels it himself, that he's the person that's being talked about. But he knows that through the words that all the other people listening would never know it's him. But any kind of revealed and open rebuke, most likely the reaction is the person would rebel, kick back. Okay?
Yeah.
First point made. Okay, ready to go on?
Yeah.
Okay, this is what God said to Moses. He says they should read this Torah, HaTorah Hazot. Now, where do we find that? That was in chapter 31:11. Remember, the king is going to read this book, and where is it? It's Neged Kol Yisrael. It's Neged means parallel. We saw the words were before of all Israel. We're now not on our page. We're back in chapter 31, verse 11, that had to do with the mitzvah of gathering all the people and the king telling them in their ears. Because it's the same thing here. Moses was the king, and he gathered Kol Yisrael, what you think is Kol Yisrael, the leaders, and it's this Torah. Divrei Musar. That's when the king reads. What does he read? He reads this. This is what he reads. The king is going to read these words because they are musar. Musar in Hebrew is ethical teachings. It's rebuke. And where? Neged Kol Yisrael. Neged means before, in front of. Why? Because the word neged, there's a lot of words you can use for before. But neged is not the main word, it's a word. So neged has a language of opposition. Because every time one gives tochacha is rebuke. These are harsh words that are in opposition. Somehow there's an opposite force. That's what it means before, but not just placed in front of you, but against.
Okay.
And where do you read them? Ba'aznehem. You read them into their ears. So that's the hint. You do it in a hinted way, like someone who's whispering. You see it? Remember, chapter 31, 11 is referring to these words that we're reading in Deuteronomy, chapter 1, verse 1. You read it ba'aznehem, into their ears, which is a hinted fashion. It's similar to speaking in a whisper, in a way that it only enters into the ear of the one who knows himself is the one who's liable in the matter. Right? Clear so far?
Yes.
Clear as mud?
Yeah.
And this is also hinted when it says, these are the things, back in our verse, where it says, these are the things which Moses spoke to Kol. Kol who? All of the leaders who have the name, the concept of Israel as a nickname because they're the leaders. Now, what did he say to them? He said to them, Bamidbar ba'arava. He spoke to them about each place they were in. The desert, in this place of Arava, right? And then the rest of the names. And why did he say these names? This was the tochacha, because they would understand, they would see themselves that, Mimeni tiru, basically by saying, from me you will see, thus ta'asu tochiach beremes. So too, just like I'm telling you the names of these places of where the sins took place, this is how you're supposed to, as a leader, give rebuke to your people through hints, because this is the greatest way and method in order to get the people to accept what you're saying and not to rebel and run away or throw the blame back on you.
Yeah, it takes a lot of wisdom.
Huh?
That would take a lot of wisdom.
Well, the Torah is wisdom,
Yes.
right? I have this, someone's writing an article about me, so I put in here that verse. I said about the non-Jews are going to say this about us. Where is it? Here. It's in Deuteronomy 4:6. You shall safeguard and perform them, for it is your wisdom and discernment in the eyes of the people. This prophecy come true right now, right here. You shall safeguard and perform them, for it is your wisdom and discernment in the eyes of the peoples, who shall hear all these decrees and who shall say, surely a wise and discerning people is the great nation. Anyway, someone's writing something about me, and it's my whole story in 3 pages. A book coming out soon. Okay. So some will say that it's specifically the great people, the leaders that are called Israel, that actually Moses spoke in the hinted way because of their honor. So the more honorable the person is, the more soft you need to be. But later when it says, Diber Moshe el Bnei Israel, the word Diber, speak to the children of the Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, which we already know is the Harmonam, the masses. So there's no obligation to give them as much honor as you have to and afford to give to the leadership. So he outright spoke very deliberately about the sins they did. He explained, you acted with the spies and you acted out with the golden calf. Now, even though the actual leaders were not guilty of the actual crimes, they were not involved with the sin of the golden calf. It was the Erev Rav, and even the people that gathered around, it was true that the 10 spies came back, they were leaders, but the people that were whining and complaining about going back and not wanting to go in were not the great. They were the masses. So the people, the great leaders, were not actually involved in these sins. Nevertheless, from the fact that they didn't give proper rebuke, the sin is hanging, the guilt hangs on them, and therefore it had to be explained to the leaders in a hinted way, because there is the ultimate sin of not giving rebuke. In other words, it's crazy. Not giving rebuke is a sin. Speaking lashon hara, talking gossip, is a sin. Eating pork is a sin. Not giving rebuke is a sin. It says it right there. We saw Leviticus. What do we say? Leviticus 19:17. I'll just say it. You know, if you don't give rebuke, you'll hate your brother in your heart even more. Sometimes, if you give rebuke properly, you'll understand. He'll be able to give a chance to clarify. You know, you say, oh, it really hurt me when this happened. He says, oh, that never happened. It wasn't me. It was someone else. So this whole time you thought it was him. Or he's, I'm so sorry. You had no idea. I got a phone call, emergency phone call, and something happened why he didn't show up and left you standing there. Meanwhile, you're hating him because he left you in the hot sun for half an hour, and then he tells you that his greatest, friend got in a car accident and he had to drop everything. And then you're not going to hate him anymore. So it's that dialogue through clarification. You shall not hate your brother in your heart when you reprove him. And then you're not going to carry the sin because of him, because even if, just a clarification, whether he was right or wrong, you end up carrying some kind of sin. If he was